tell us a little bit what you do and how come you joined the Dubbing Academy? How did you find your way to our academy? And so tell us a little bit about
well, I've been doing voiceovers full time for a little over 14 years now. Everything from animations to audiobooks, video games, you know, the usual stuff. Lots of online work these days. And I've had the pleasure of doing all kinds of interesting, iconic characters, like the Geico Gecko, which is an ad icon over here. Ghost from Call of Duty for a promo for one of their video games. And
a huge game, I remember. This was a very...
Yeah, I did a promo for when they were releasing Call of Duty 3, which was great fun. Anyway, so I've been doing this for a long time, but then of course, over the last couple of years, there's been this explosion of opportunities for English language dubbing, which didn't exist until a few years ago, thanks to streaming companies like Netflix and Amazon, but also thanks to global commerce. Online companies now from all over the world want to localize their content for every market, including English. So I noticed this trend, and because I have a background in acting as well as voiceovers, I thought this was a perfect marriage of my skills, voiceover and acting, and I really enjoy it. But unfortunately, when I went to investigate, I was a newbie. I didn't know much about this. I'd done some dubbing for some European companies who were dubbing commercials and some training videos, but I really didn't have a great deal of experience. So I went looking for guidance, training. What software do I use? What are the techniques involved in dubbing? And honestly, there really isn't much out there. Then I came across, thank goodness, your Media Next Dubbing Academy. And it was just a revelation, a complete revelation to me.
You know, I feel great listening to you. It's very nice to hear that.
Well, to be honest, I think this is still the case now because I look every so often. Your company is the only one where you get a formalized education in what's involved in dubbing, what the history of dubbing is, how to do it efficiently and effectively. And I found it just enormously helpful, without it, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now and really pushing forward into the industry.
Great, very nice. And also I would add that we are the only company that are doing that in parallel with our technology. So the Dubbing Academy is, you know, working hand to hand with Studio Next, our recording platform. We have a few platforms outside. I mean, there are a few platforms outside, but they don't have the school. Or if they have the school, they don't have the platform. We have both because TransPerfect is a tech company. So it was very easy for me to create the Dubbing Academy and work with the developers of the platform, who are, by the way, all French, so it's easy for me to scream at them, you know, and so that's why it's a little bit unique, because we have the technology and the creative at the same time. You know?
The technology is just remarkable. I'm not technical, and to be honest, my preference would be to just go into a studio, do my bit, and not worry about anything else. But in today's world, you have to be a technician if you're going to be a successful voice actor. You have to know a bit about the technology. And the Studio Next software that's part of the Dubbing Academy's process, I was amazed how easy it made it, even for someone like me that's not very good at the technical aspect of things. It made it so much easier to dub in a manner where I felt confident and capable of doing it accurately and appropriately.
This is great. And Studio Next is you know, we are upgrading this software practically every month. And since the last 2 or 3 months now, we are having the writers write directly the adaptation on Studio Next, because you have the rhythm band, you have the sound, you have the picture, so it's very easy to adapt directly in the platform. You don't need to do like before, you know, on an Excel grid with the time code in, time code out, each line. That was ancient times. Now it's much more efficient. So next step is for the writers. Now the writers are starting to discover Studio Next, and we did a few projects already, and it's very well received. So good. Listen, I wanted to ask you a few questions because you have a very interesting background. So the first question is, what's the difference, and what does this involve for you? The voiceover and the dubbing acting. So voiceover and dubbing. How do you see that? Because they are really two different worlds, and you know, a lot of people stay in one category or in the other. A lot of people do voiceover and that's all they do. A lot of people do dubbing and that's all they do. You do a little bit both and you cross the bridge. So tell us a little bit about that, because it's very interesting. I think if you do one, you can do the other one. But you know, you have to think a little bit differently.
Yeah, I agree with you. In my experience, there is a great deal of crossover between straight voiceover, dubbing, and in fact, on-camera acting. You might think that something like doing a voiceover for something very serious, like a safety training course, is very different from doing a character in a video game. But in all honesty, it's the same process, because you're acting no matter which. If you're portraying as an instructor, that's acting. If you're portraying a vampire in a shoot 'em up video game, that's acting. They're just different characters.
You can be more or less expressive, but you are still acting. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. And on-camera acting is similar, except that then you've got a bunch of other things come into play. Like you've now got your face and your body that are all part of the performance in addition to your voice. Voiceover teaches you some things which are very useful to take over into dubbing. Like cold reading, for example. I can take a script and without ever having seen it before, and I can read it almost perfectly first time. Dubbing, because it's a fast moving process and you have to be efficient, being able to cold read is extraordinarily helpful. But the difference between dubbing and voiceover is, with voiceover, you have the luxury of not worrying about timing. Dubbing requires a skill that is, you can develop, and especially with the Studio Next software, which makes it easy to develop the skill. Dubbing requires timing necessary to meet the original performer's performance, to match that in a consistent and appropriate manner based upon what the original performer did. So it is a different, you do have additional components with dubbing, but those are very learnable if you're an experienced voiceover artist.
And this is very interesting. Did you discover, because you were just talking about the text scrolling in front of you, which is a rhythm band. You know, I always repeat the same thing. The rhythm band was invented by the French in the 30s, so it's not a new concept, you know. So it's very old, but only the French, Canadian, and in Belgium they are using it. The rest of the world didn't understand this concept. Now it's getting a little bit more used a little bit everywhere, because you have some softwares, but before it was done on a 35 millimeter, so it was very limited. So you didn't know the rhythm band before.
No.
what is your take on that? Do you find that helpful? Because some people are telling me that they don't like it. So, and I find hard to believe. So tell me your take on the Rythmo Band.
That's very easy for me to tell you. It's fantastic. And here's why, right? If you imagine, okay, so I'm coming from the voiceover background. Typically, I have a script. I can read it at my own pace, at my own time. I have the luxury of going back and messing with it whenever I want, however I want. And the client has chosen me to deliver that script my way. For whatever reason, they picked me. With dubbing, your job as a dubbing actor is to replicate to the best of your abilities the original performance on screen, whether that's animated, whether that's live action, whatever. And to match the lip sync too, and to have what you describe as the Rythmo Band. I didn't know this existed. My brain was going, how do you do this? What's the technology behind it? How am I going to be able to achieve this goal? The Rythmo Band is, for those who haven't seen it, basically it's the script comes along like a ticker at the bottom of the screen in time with the video, and it enables you to read the script at exactly the right time to match the video that's going along. It's very difficult to describe how easy it makes the process for those who haven't seen it. But for anyone that's thinking of checking out the Academy, I strongly urge you to do it, because if nothing else, the Studio Next software is a revelation if you're thinking about dubbing, in terms of making it so much easier to match the performance against what was the original performance. I love it.
Think about it, the Rythmo Band is really the ancestor of the karaoke. Karaoke is a child of the Rythmo Band. It's exactly the same concept.
That's a perfect analogy there. So for all of you who have never seen a Rythmo Band, think of karaoke machine with the lyrics coming across as the singers singing.
And we know that everybody can follow the karaoke machine, so it's the same concept. Caroline is asking a question, and I think you should try to answer this question. How do you train at home? You are at home, how do you train? How do you rehearse? Do you do some daily routine? What do you do?
Honestly, I don't have time to train or rehearse most of the day. Obviously, in my past, I've been doing this for 14 years, so I have done some training. I have some acting training behind me, and I have some voiceover training behind me. But honestly, now I'm reasonably confident in what I do on a day-to-day basis. So if I'm doing, for example, later today, I'll be doing an audio book. I do audio books for the Library of Congress over here for their blind program. Yeah. People who are blind, they record audiobooks. And for that, what I would do is I would just, honestly, I don't want to make myself look stupid. Well, I don't care if I look stupid. In order to loosen up the voice, I will pick a song and I will sing a few verses of that song first. Just to liven me up and to loosen the vocal cord.
And I urge people to listen to you, because this is a very good advice.
I actually I can't remember, I picked it up from another voiceover artist, and he said that whenever he used to drive to the studio to do recordings, in his car, he would put the music on loud and sing along to just warm up the vocal cords. I thought it was an excellent way to do it. And it's worked.
And get some adrenaline in the body, so you are pumped up when you arrive to the studio.
And that's actually very, very valid too, especially when it comes to dubbing, because dubbing, more so than voiceover, it is about performance. So although you've got to be careful where your mic is and not move around too much and make a noise, you do get a better performance if you get into it and you're acting and you're moving a little bit and getting a bit of, motion going. That helps with the performance too.
And Caroline is still asking us, how do you train using Rythmo Band at home so you are efficient in the studio? Obviously, in the studio, like you said earlier, you have the luxury of being the guest. So you arrive and you ask the sound engineer, can I have a glass of water? And can I say something in front of the mic? And you don't do anything, you just talk, which is great. When you are at home, you have to do something. So you have to be your own engineer. That's what we try to explain in the Dubbing Academy. Your own engineer and your own director. So
Green tea. Green tea. Good for the throat.
absolutely. And we have a little video done by our colleague Annika that is showing that a green apple is also good to your mouth moist, and so you don't have a lips noise when you talk. Very good. So next question. I understand that you do a lot of animation character, and you know I spent my life practically doing that. When I was at Warner Brothers, I was responsible for the dubbing of all the Looney Tunes, and I spent 20 years recording the Looney Tunes all over the world and casting them and training them. And of course, the key when you dub characters like Daffy Duck or Bugs Bunny is to be consistent, because you cannot change the voice, obviously. So that's why in the voice placement chapter in the Academy, we are explaining how to place your voice to be able to redo it several times and be consistent. So now, how are you consistent, and how do you make sure that you are consistent when you dub a character? Let's say you recorded this character one time, and 2 weeks after you have to redo the same thing. How do you do? Do you listen again? Do you remember what you did?
Well, I'm going to be honest with
Please.
you. In the past, I pretty much made it up as I went along. So let's say I was voicing whatever the character is. I would perform it, and I do have a reasonably good memory about how I perform something and how it feels. And obviously, I can go back and listen to the original. But here's what I discovered when I went through your Media Next Dubbing Academy. The importance of voice placement, it's just, it cannot be overstated. And I never thought about it in formalized terms like you do in the Academy. When you speak in your own voice, in a different character's voice, your voice is coming from a particular part of your body, your throat, from your head. And when you start thinking about it, you realize that. So, for example, here's a good example. Think of someone like, taking someone from your examples in the Academy, Marvin the Martian. He speaks from the back of his throat like this.
Yes, this is correct.
And although if you'd have said to me, can you talk like Marvin the Martian? I'd have gone, sure, and I'd have done it. I would have never recognized how I'm doing it, such that the voice is coming from back here. Or Granny from Tweety Pie is coming from up here. Oh, Tweety Pie. You don't think about it. But once you start to think about it, you realize just how physical the performance is.
Absolutely.
How visceral. And only by recognizing where the voice is coming from, what effects are being applied to the voice, be they nasal effects, be they a lisp, thuffering, thuckadash, or whatever. And then you've got to be a little bit studious about this. You've got to write this stuff down. So if you're performing a particular character, particularly an iconic character, whose voice is instantly recognizable, you've got to say, okay, this is where the voice is coming from for this character. These are the effects that I have to apply to this voice in order to perform this character. And you have to have that with you. And you have to save that. So that if someone comes back to you and says, brilliant, love that, but we just changed the line in scene 3. I need you to do a different line for scene 3. You can go, instead of having to struggle to get the voice back, you've got it. You've got it written down. Yeah. You've got audio version you can listen to, but you go, okay, this is back of throat, this is top of head, this is bit nasally, this is a bit whatever. And you can instantly get back into that character. And unless you formalize it in that manner, I don't think you can truly give a good performance consistently over and over and over.
That was my experience when I started to dub the Looney Tunes at Warner. I started to travel a lot, and people didn't really know. Some people were doing the right voice, but they didn't really know what they were doing. And I started to think we need to formalize that. We need to write it, to write the recipe. When you have the recipe, you can redo it. Without recipe, you know, one time is good, one time it's not good, and it's not efficient. There is a good question. Yeah,
honestly, I just want to make a point of that. Again, this was revelatory, and it's not something that I've seen anywhere else. The formalization of voice placement, voice characterization, and voice effects. I think that is revolutionary for dubbing, and I think what you did with that was just genius.
Thank you. It's maybe genius is a little bit too much, but it's okay. So we have a question from David Perry, a voiceover actor, a voice actor, not maybe voiceover, voice actor. And he's asking, do you differentiate between regular movies and video games? That's interesting. You know, most of the time, and I remember when I was doing the games for the WB franchise, the first game I was responsible for was Batman Arkham Asylum. You know, it was like 250,000 lines, but for me, the first thing I said is, you know, between games and movie, it's the same thing for me. It's really the same thing. So the technique is a little bit different, and we are going, by the way, to add a chapter in the Dubbing Academy about games, and I want to do that, and I started to work on that. Another little module just about games, because, you know, gaming is becoming a big industry. It's not really the difference, and you tell me what you think about that. It's not really the difference between the movie and games. The acting part is the same. You have a lot of characters that are, you know, most of the time very assertive with big voices, etc. But it's a technique, because most of the time in game you don't have pictures. And you have a stream of lines, so you are a little bit in the blind, and you don't really know what you are doing. So you have to have a relation between the actors and the producer of the game, especially in English. You say, you know, in the European languages they don't have that too much, but in English, you are in a room and you say, it's coming. It. What is it? Is it a machine? Is it an animal? Is it, you don't know. When I was doing the games, we were always talking to the producer of the game to say, okay, can you explain what's going on here? Because, you know, you dub without picture. Did you do some video games?
I have done video games, and lately, what's happening is there's a lot of independent producers, indie games, and I just got actually a lead in a small indie game, which I have to record next week, and it's an old man. I did an old man for him, but in truth, video games, in my experience, are very similar to animations, very similar to live action, because you're just acting a character. And these days, video games are very realistic. So they're not looking for exaggerated characters like in animation. They're looking for real characters. So it's similar to regular acting. So, you know, you're just performing. Often I'm performing in my own voice because they want a middle-aged English guy, and that's me. So So I'm just performing in my own voice. But what you said about context is important. And sometimes I will do a directed session where the director is listening in and watching me record live, and then they can guide you as to what the context is for the line, so you know how to perform it appropriately. But without that, if it's in the script, which I get a lot of the indie games provide you the script so you can see the context. But without that, you're right. It's coming. What's coming? Is it good?
Exactly.
Is it bad? You need, you need the context. But typically I'll get the context either through a directed session or it's in the script. But the acting and the performance is very similar. The only thing that's really, really different and that I find the hardest is the iconic animated characters, Bugs, Daffy, things like that. Because they're so exaggerated, because they're so larger than life, those are the most strenuous and difficult to do on a consistent basis.
You are absolutely right. And we are close to the end, but I want to ask you the last question. Give some advice to our listeners. You are an experienced actor. You have a lot of years of practice and recording behind you. So which advice would you give to all these young kids that want to go into this?
Okay, the best advice I can give you is to keep it realistic. Remember that it's called show business, because it's a business, and particularly in these days, you have to be good at running a business, because I know it's sad to say 90% of your time is not going to be spent performing. 90% of your time is going to be spent running your business and primarily finding work and winning work. And here's the most important thing I will say about that. If the more auditions you do, the more jobs you apply for, the more jobs you will get. It's just a numbers game. It's as simple as that. In this market, it's very competitive. And if you win 2 or 4 jobs out of every 100 you apply to, you might think, oh, that's dreadful. No, it's good. That's the market we are in. The market we are in is very competitive. So you have to be prepared to get out there, banging on doors, marketing your services again and again and again. That's in addition to, of course, practicing your craft and being good at what you do.
Always. Andrew, that was great. I really thank you very much. And it's after this great and wise advice that we are going to conclude this session. So I remind everybody, the Art of Dubbing Shared Secrets episodes are on the 3rd Thursday of each month. So hope to see everybody next month. Andrew, thank you again and good luck with your project. And we stay in touch.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.